So yeah, Angel's done a good introduction for me already, so I'll just kick us off from here. So good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar this morning. It's really great to have everyone and really great presentation so far, Narishka. So I'm just going to touch a little bit for us before we move into a very interesting panel discussion, just in terms of South Africa and what's happening on the South African front. So it was quite an interesting weekend because if you had seen my presentation on Friday, it's actually changed over the weekend, and let me explain why. So I looked at South Africa's artificial intelligence planning, and they'd released a document probably about a year or 2 years ago. And to be honest with you, the document that they had originally released, it wasn't actually worth giving or providing comment on because I thought it was actually a very poor document. However, over the weekend, they released the South African National Artificial Intelligence Policy Framework. You can see it's dated August 2024. But let me just give you some feedback in terms of what's happening across the continent, more importantly. So the most impressive AI document released by a government, by any of our African governments, has been the Rwanda document. And it's quite clear, Rwanda, I think a landlocked country, is sitting in a position where they know that the use of technology, etc., is going to be key to their sustainability of their GDP. And they've almost already put direct plans. They've put ministers in charge with deadlines and timelines on their document for saying that they want to be the AI hub of South Africa, or well, of Africa by 2028, I think it is. And they've already started taking initiatives and they're holding people accountable. And their plan is by 2030 to have 25% of their GDP being driven by artificial intelligence type revenues. I think that's a very deliberate strategy. Now, the new South Africa document, I was able to only work through it very briefly over the weekend, but the new document is starting to head towards the levels of the Rwanda document, which gives me hope for the country. But I still think there's a lot of catch-up that needs to be done in terms of us being a hub for artificial intelligence, as well as what percentage of our GDP should actually be generated out from artificial intelligence into the future. I think it's going to be key for our competitiveness. And I know one of the topics we're going to talk about this morning is the unemployment rates in South Africa. So I think that's also something that this document will need to start dealing with in terms of how do we future fit ourselves to take advantage of the benefits of AI. Thinking that South Africa is in a bubble, that we cannot stop the AI revolution. I think Narishka showed us so much this morning that I don't think this thing is stopping anytime soon. If anything, it's going to move faster and faster. So Narishka touched very briefly on the EU AI Act. And yes, this is a very busy slide. I wouldn't want to take your attention away from going through all of the detail. It was just to show you sort of a summary of this piece of regulation on a page. Now, South Africa, as it stands right now, I think Narishka touched on POPIA, etc., as one of the regulations. But around AI itself, we don't really have any regulation per se. So the best piece of regulation that I've been able to pick up globally has been the EU AI Act, which has been enacted in across the EU effectively. And what it effectively talks about is being able to start generating or looking at your AI solutions into low, medium, and high risk. And I think some of the high risk items that were mentioned, sort of credit, underwriting, etc., where you are using this AI type solutions to make decisions such as that. And then prohibited AI practices, I think that's the most important one. So where you are using race, gender, etc., for purposes of making decisions, they've actually prohibited it. And why I like this regulation is that the enforcement is going to be critical. And I think one of the things that I can share with you is that the proposed fines that are being spoken about are 6% of global revenues for non-compliance. So if you're an organization that is using artificial intelligence and you are using a prohibited AI practice, you could be subject to a 6% of your global revenue fine. Now, what I see happening in South Africa is I see this type of regulation, a similar type of regulation coming out in South Africa, which means that key to us as South Africans at the moment, or looking at it with a business lens at the moment, is how do we start taking some of the principles that are already in this act, even though it's not legislation for us as we know it, and starting to comply with them already or start building the guardrails. Because once the act comes out, I don't think people or organizations or private South Africa are actually waiting for the regulation to come out. They are still full steam ahead with using artificial intelligence in order to keep their competitive advantages. But I think one of the key things coming out is that you're going to have the guardrails in place in your organization to help manage the risks of artificial intelligence. And one of the concepts that we are working on, and where I've seen a lot of literature at the moment, is how do we use AI to govern other AI? I think it probably makes the most amount of sense, considering that this is a great opportunity for us to look at risk management in a different light altogether. So I think I just want to pause that as an idea and say that effectively a lot of the risks that Narishka spoke about, they're going to materialize. And without those guardrails, right now as South Africans, we're not exposed to the potential of getting fined for the way we use AI, but it's coming and coming soon. So we rather start building these guardrails to prepare our businesses for what's coming down the line. And then, yeah, for those in the cybersecurity industry, you would have all heard of the NIST frameworks that are out there. But NIST is effectively an information security standard. And they've already come out with their first framework for governing AI. And I think it speaks a lot in terms of what your governance processes are. How do you understand your AI? How do you manage it? And how do you measure it? And I think this is a great framework that we've seen even South African organizations using so far in order to manage their AI. I think as a general view across corporate South Africa at the moment, we're seeing quite a high number of low risk AI solutions being tested, with them building out their frameworks and their risk management at the moment. However, that being said, the industry that we're seeing the highest number of high risk AI cases, in fact, bordering on the line of prohibited, if I'm being honest, is probably in the marketing industry. So for all the organizations with third-party contracts with your marketing agencies, those are definitely contracts that you want to start looking at, because the marketing agencies, with some of the marketing campaigns that we are seeing out there at the moment, they're definitely using artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of concepts and a lot of things that are being used where there's probably IP concerns, but there is potentially the risk that your personal information or your customers' personal information is being handed over to marketing agencies who are using it for purposes that you are just not aware of. They're coming back to you with the perfect campaign. But I think this NIST framework, the way you manage your third-party suppliers in terms of artificial intelligence, are definitely growing topics at the moment. And definitely, I think the purpose of my session today was just to provide just awareness around these topics. But I think it's something that's definitely growing very fast. And I think by and large, I think, we talk about new careers coming out of the CASA profession. I think one of them is definitely going to become AI governance. And I don't think it's going to be as broad as other types of governance. I think it's going to be a very specialized role where you're going to actually have a person who's going to be responsible reporting into the C-suite or reporting directly into the board, who's going to be tasked with managing the governance of artificial intelligence. So for the up-and-coming CAs out there, or even some of the more established CASAs out there in the governance, risk, and compliance space, the area of AI governance is definitely a fast-moving space. And I do follow the number of jobs being created globally at the moment in the space of AI governance is growing exponentially. So definitely something that's worth looking forward to, and also starting to upskill and create yourself in terms of these new areas and new disciplines.